We are live. It's been 3 weeks since we've been here in the studio filming. We took a little sabbatical,
Yeah, I missed everyone.
a little short one.
Yeah, but it felt long.
It did feel really long.
Yeah.
Today, though, I figure we start going into all of these questions that we're getting. We're getting a lot of DMs, a lot of questions, and we don't do advice or therapy over DM, but we do actually take the questions and we can discuss them on the podcast. So today we have 5 relationship questions, and we're specifically talking about today romantic relationships. So we've selected 5 of those questions. Are you ready for this?
Let's do this.
Okay. We might as well first start with an intro. Welcome to 12 Week Relationships. This is your place for better relationships in weeks, not years. My name is Pye.
I'm Dr. Glenn.
Well, when we say relationships, by the way, we're talking about all of them, starting with the one that you have with yourself and working on outwards, your friends, your family, and of course, romantic relationships. Before we get into today, though, I thought I'd surprise both Anthony and Glenn with a little bit of, I haven't given you guys updates on like growth and everything like that.
Oh, let's do it.
Okay, so for our listeners too, first we should start with a gigantic thank you. We have surpassed 50,000 followers on both Instagram and TikTok. I hate the word followers. I'm going to say friends that are interested in our subject that we're talking about. I believe as of today, actually, we just passed 60,000.
That's
so
amazing.
It's flying. At the same time, I'm going to give you audio only downloads. So just from the podcast itself, we are about to pass 20,000 downloads a month.
That's incredible.
Not like, overall, 20,000 a month now are listening. When you factor in YouTube, we get almost to 1,000 a day. We're close to the 30,000 number. So that's going to be the next thing. But yeah, so for everybody that's listening, gigantic thank you. We have completely filled the wait list for coaching clients, which we have a lot in store. So if you are interested in one-on-one coaching with Dr. Glenn, then go ahead, join the wait list. But not only are we going to reach out as soon as there are openings, but then we also have online group coaching, which we are preparing for. Hopefully are going to launch that kind of mid-year. So we have that as well.
Yeah, there's so many options that are available. If you join the wait list, we're going to try and call you as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And then depending upon availability, we can either schedule, we're going to try and do it early as possible. But if not, there's other options where you can do it maybe like a month later or so.
Yeah, we're trying to reach out to everybody right away and then, get you booked and get you set up and then set the appointment for like 1 month or 2 months down the road when there's an opening in the schedule, basically. So, but yeah, it's been fantastic. It's been a crazy ride so far. Can you believe that we're 3 months into this, 3.5 months into this?
Yeah, it's incredible how everything has grown, and it's only been such a short period of time, but it feels longer sometimes, in a great way.
It does. It feels like we've done, I know that exact feeling that you're talking about because it feels like we've done a year's worth of work in this 3-month period. It's been so condensed.
Yeah. And then that established feeling after a year, right? So it feels like that now.
Yeah. Okay. With that, let's go ahead and get into these questions. We're keeping all of these questions anonymous, and I'm going to go ahead and read it out. I'm going to let you take the first stab at each of these, Dr. Glenn. Okay.
I'm nervous.
Yeah, this one's an interesting one. I never know if it's actually their friend, but in this case, it says, "This is about my close friend. She's married with a man who is always quiet and feelingless. She spent 10 years and she has a child with that man. One day she got fed up and she spoke about everything, that she can't keep the relationship, that she wants a divorce. But she realized that he was also planning to leave her soon. And this made it fairly easy for him when she brought it up, basically." Now, her question is, why did she stay? Why did he stay? Why did she stay knowing now that he really didn't want that relationship either? And this is supposedly a friend that's asking on behalf of this person. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different factors. So I mean, I think more on a superficial level. Number one, there's, usually there's kids, financial reasons, safety reasons, or perceived quality of life reasons. Like we like where we live, or the belief that it's going to be worse if we divorce, and all these things that we have is going to crumble.
Yeah.
You hear that a lot.
You're looking at first that question of like, why did she stay, right?
Yeah,
Like, these are all
why is she
factors.
staying? Like, yeah, I'm doing it for the kids, and I want them to have a two-parent household, and we have this mortgage together. So like more on a superficial level, like that's kind of like the first level of explanations that happen. And then once you start going, you break it down further. It's usually there's complements. There's complements. We talked about trauma bonds. There's complements of wounds, and they're trying to work those pains out. And each person is usually arguing like they're being the healthy one, but they're both in their pain, and it's just going on for years and years and years until eventually there's a realization like this isn't working out.
Yeah. There can be a lot of different
There's a lot of
factors
different. I'm just
going
trying
into
to
this.
simplify such a complicated question, and there's so many different ways that this can go.
Yeah. And I almost want to say we need to do a separate episode just on reasons we stay. That in and of itself, and also kind of going into the nuances of that. Because, for example, there's common cliche pieces of advice that we might hear. You have to stay for the kids, that type of stuff. And we often believe it. And people do stay because of children. And they don't realize that we think that you're supposed to stay because it's better for the kids, when in reality, in many, many cases, not in all of them, but in many cases, staying will do them more harm. And so a lot of the common cliche things that keep us there are actually completely wrong. Other things like a lot of times people stay because of God and religion, right? They stay because they believe that they shouldn't get divorced and that God wouldn't want them to. But that's weird too, because if you believe that God, this person, it doesn't matter whether you believe it's a he or a she or whatever that being might be, most of us look at that person as a heavenly parent type figure, right? And the question would be, well, if we as imperfect parents want our children to be happy, why would God want anything less for you? Why would God want you to stay in a really bad or unhealthy relationship? So those reasons don't really make sense. But then beneath all of it, when you start answering those, then you often run into the actual real reason, which is the trauma bond, the reason why.
Yeah, and it could either be like it was there already, or it starts to form because of all the dynamics, the religion, the culture, all the different components of like what you've been taught, and these mentated thoughts of like this is the way it's supposed to be. And eventually it just starts to deteriorate, and it just becomes you become used to it.
Yeah. I think the other piece that this person asked, and it's interesting too that I'm not sure the dynamic of this. If this is a guy that's asking on behalf of a woman who's married to another man, then there very likely could be kind of an emotional affair also happening between this. Like she's reaching out to him as this kind of, he's getting pulled into it. And that is its own thing that, I would, from our own kind of research, would say, avoid. If you are that guy, do not get pulled in. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're that person outside of the relationship that's getting pulled into this emotional affair, stay away. Because again, it's this unhealthy sort of trauma bond that you're connecting on.
And it's leading to triangulation too.
It's leading to a lot of things. I've seen such strained cases. I've seen one case. I remember one case where the person felt it was a guy, and the woman was married to someone that he didn't approve of, basically. And it started with an emotional affair. It led to an actual affair, and the two are so unhealthy. I mean, for the guy to have an affair with this person that is married and has children, you're not in a good place to do that. And for the woman to step out and to do that while she's still married, despite, whatever reasoning that you might have, again, you're not in a good place. So you're creating a new relationship in an incredibly toxic environment and with a completely unset foundation. And for the guy, it was, well, I need to help her to be able to get out of this unhealthy marriage. I was like, why? Why?
Well, I mean, that shows that person's pathology is coming into play too.
For sure.
If you feel like you need to rescue somebody or you got to be somebody's hero, once again, that's another trauma wound that's coming into play. So it's just the whole thing, like you were saying, is really, really unhealthy. And this is like, regardless of the reasons or the explanations, it looks like a drug addict the longer you stay in a toxic relationship.
1000%.
It looks like, hey, cool. Like, yeah, we're going to work it out. We just got some things to work out. And eventually they start to physically deteriorate. Their eyes look chaotic. They act crazy. Their explanations are crazy. They're on edge and they have this look like they're using cocaine for years. And regardless of the reasons, they just start looking like a drug addict.
It would be wild if somebody had the expensive machinery and could actually put these two effects side by side and look at the brain, like the comparisons of a person on drugs versus a person that is in one of these kind of toxic, I guess, affair type states, or like these, what do I want to call it, taboo sort of relationships, right? Mm-hmm. Because at the beginning of both, the drug addict as well as the person that's kind of getting involved in this, there's this incredible high at the beginning of both these where mm-hmm. you'll see this. It's almost like the person feels renewed, like they're a completely new person. And how can this be bad or unhealthy when I feel so good? Mm-hmm. At least when talking about the relationship aspect, right?
Yeah.
And then, like you said, with time, the emotional weight of it starts to set in. And then it starts to become this addiction where it's this constant up and down roller coaster, and you need the hit of this, and then you got to get away, and then no, but it feels too good, and it's almost identical.
It's basically the same thing. You're just addicted to the drama of that person, right? Like, what happens when you use a drug? Like, it's awesome the first time, and then what do they say? What do drug addicts say? You're chasing that high, mm-hmm. and you're like, oh, I want to re-experience that first time that I used, and you never get that high, and it's just about addiction at that point. I don't want to have side effects or consequences.
Yeah.
And then when you talk about someone that's in an abusive or traumatic relationship, they do the same thing. I remember when we first dated, he or she was so great and we had all these great memories, but then all these problems are taking place. But then they'll go back to that. 10 years ago, we had such a great relationship, and they're just literally like in this drug addicted state.
Yeah. Okay. So in this case, for the friend, I think we would encourage to steer clear. I mean, befriend, be a supportive, if you want to support, fine.
But have boundaries.
Have boundaries and don't get involved in this. Even if that person is someone that you could potentially love in the future, let them clean up their life. Let them get to a place where they're completely healthy. Let them get to, that state before you even engage there.
So know your motives as the friend.
Yes.
Like, make sure your intentions are pure.
Yes.
And if it's ulterior motives of I want to get with this person or I want to be with this person, rescue this person, you need to really pull yourself away.
Yeah. And there's so many, I feel like we could do a whole episode just on this thing in and of itself. But to that person that's in there, you do need to answer the question of why did I stay? But it could be a number of things.
Sure.
And it's going to lead to anger and resentment and frustration. But those are all things for you personally to resolve. If you chose to stay, whether that person wants the relationship or not, if you chose to stay, you need to understand why and know that choice was your responsibility.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, regardless of the reason, like you said, you got to be accountable, individually accountable for, okay, I accept my choices. What can I do to make this better moving forward?
Yeah. Okay. It's an interesting thing, though, that both people would have stayed 10 years in something that neither of them wanted. Isn't that fascinating?
But that's the thing. It's a common thing, though.
It's very common.
Like, that's what you're kind of told, like grind through, try to make it work because of all the different factors that you're told.
Yeah.
All the bad advice that's out there, cultural components.
All right. Let's go on to number 2. You ready for this one?
All right.
One of our listeners asked, I am in a situationship. I like that term, a situationship.
Okay.
We actually wrote this term in our guidance. We called it a situational relationship, but it never dawned on me to actually shorten it to situationship.
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
She says it's more than a friendship, but we're less than a couple. What do I do? Sounds like she doesn't want to be in a situationship.
So
why don't you first define what is a situationship? A situational relationship.
Okay, but I guess what I'm asking is, are you like you're the friend? Like you're the friend zone and then you want more than that?
No, I think it's like another term for it would be friends with benefits, right?
So they're hooking up.
Yeah, you're probably in kind of a intimate sort of space, but you're more than friends, but you're not a couple type thing.
I see. So are they like, well, I mean, I'm just asking, like, are they, it seems like the person that's wanting more the other person, maybe they're getting out of a relationship or they're
That
healing from a relationship, and then therefore you're around, and then you're kind of at this, because okay, even without the sex, right? Like there's oftentimes like you have the person that they got out of a relationship and then they hang out with the friend, and then that friend wants more, but they're just kind of emotionally just there for them, and then they're not wanting anything else from you, but they're just kind of, you're in that pseudo space of friend partner
yeah.
until they're ready to move on.
Yeah.
And so if you're that person and you feel like you're in that mode, maybe that's what's happening.
Well, in this case, the person that's reaching out, I do believe that she is the one, from what she said, she is the one that wants more in the relationship. She wants it to be a relationship, but the other person is not there. So it's kind of friends with benefits type situation. But like you said, though, the interesting thing about this is that situational relationships are created by exactly that, the situation itself, right? It could be, maybe it's two people that work together. They're together frequently, so they have certain things. They have the proximity, and they connect quite a bit because they are in that same place. But there's fundamental missing pieces that would prevent it from kind of from the relationship taking hold outside of the situation, right? So it could be the fact that they're just both in this area and they both happen to maybe enjoy a particular hobby or a particular interest. And so that's there, but maybe they don't really share much else beyond that. And so you can have these friendships and these friends with benefit type situational relationships where you want more, or at least one person does, but the other person might not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like you would have to define what the situation is, like you're saying. And then if that was the initial agreement and then this person's not responding, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I think there's a few things happening.
Okay.
Number one, why would you want something more from a situational relationship? Meaning, like, for her, if she knows what it is, if this other person has clearly defined what they're willing to do and what they want, why would you want any more?
But that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, I think the person that's asking the question, they have to be really honest with themselves.
100%.
Like if they were like, this is a situational relationship. Let's say the person that they're with defines it that way, but initially, like, that's not what they want, but they're like going with it because ultimately they want more.
Exactly.
They're not entering it in an honest space. So I guess what I'm saying is, okay, one, if that's the case, then this isn't a situational relationship for you.
Yeah.
You're playing that role, but you're really seeking something longer.
Yeah. You're saying that, if you're for friends with benefits to actually work, or for this situational to work for what it is, right? Both people have to have the intent that this is a situational relationship and nothing more.
Correct.
This is the benefit. We are this and nothing more. And there's a clear defined boundary going into it. But what you're essentially saying is that this person's going into it with the hope that it's going to change, that it'll become something more. And that's not an honest way to enter it.
And that's not situational versus your explanation. It is situational and then it's becoming more. Then, I mean, I think that's okay. Like, okay, fine. It's like have the conversation then.
Yeah.
What's the fear behind it? Because you entered it in an honest space.
Yeah. So what we have is the difference between like a situationship versus basically unrequited love, right? You actually love the person.
Yeah.
And they don't love you back because, for whatever reason behind this. Now, that's actually a very common thing that we notice is you'll have both people actually have the conversation. This is friends with benefit, but one of them is secretly holding out hope for more. And so they're entering it with in this space of like, well, I'm actually in love with this person. I actually want this to turn into something. And then that underlying expectation, just because they say the words out loud, doesn't change the underlying expectation. And of course, it leads to complete disaster.
And dishonesty and distrust, like the whole thing, the foundation is not honest.
Yeah.
So it can crumble.
That's a weird part about it, though, is because I've seen those case studies where they actually do have the conversation out loud and it still goes that direction, despite both people being clear and upfront about it. But one person wasn't being honest about it.
Yeah. And then this is my thing. The intent is really important because if you enter it as a situational relationship at the beginning, then I don't think it would be as difficult to say, okay, you know what? This is situational, but I'm starting to get some feelings. What should we do? Should we just pull apart? Do you want to, I think it would be comfortable to have that conversation, more comfortable versus this kind of dishonest space.
Yeah. The guidance here then would be for the person to actually really clearly and honestly answer the question of, if you know it's a situational relationship, why do you care? Why do you care that it's not anything more? And if you do, then maybe understand that you're not expecting, your expectations are for something more, and that needs to be clearly communicated. And if it's not reciprocated, get yourself out of it.
Agreed. So either way, regardless, be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We kind of completely just sidestep the whole, I don't know, the moral, ethical piece of, should you have friends with benefits?
To me, like, as long as it's sincere and honest, I think it's okay.
You got to get married before you have sex, bro. That's the clear, and that's just the God's honest truth of all of it.
Pastor Pye.
Pastor Pye? Yeah. Sound like Pastor Pye.
The truth is coming out, man.
Yeah. Now, we're not going to make any moral or ethical judgments on that side. I think, I don't know. That's, again, another conversation, another time, another place.
Oh, for sure.
I think there's problems on both sides of those absolutes. Okay. Next one. You ready for this?
Yes.
How do I show my wife that she has a problem with buying things? She's buying so many things that she risks us losing everything, but she's denying it. Yeah. So apparently she's spending
a lot of money
from, he goes on to basically say, like, from health insurance, from the house, all of it. And then when I confront her, she's aggressively denying everything.
Yeah. I mean, spending, whether drug use, gambling, spending, they're all addictions.
Mm-hmm.
And then the form may be different, but the addiction cycle is the same.
Yeah.
And basically, regardless of, like in this instance, the addiction, if it is an addiction, is it's hurting the family, it's hurting your daily functioning. And that is a core definition of addiction. You're doing something to the extreme, and it's hurting your daily ability to do things. And if you can't live in a house and you can't do the things that you need to do, then that is an addiction. She needs to get help. It needs to be addressed. An intervention needs to take place. He should reach out to people that have that spending addiction. They can do an immediate intervention and start intervening, because until the addiction is addressed and she can stabilize herself, nothing you say or do will matter.
Well, he even went on to say, this is the other interesting piece of it, is he went on to say that we're not really talking right now. She won't say anything to me, and she looks at me as if, his words, not mine, she looks at me as if I'm Adolf Hitler. First, she really needs to understand who that man was, because that is a very extreme scenario.
But people that are addicted say really crazy things.
Yeah. But what was said right there clues me into, another piece. We talk of regard is the first piece of desire, right? When we look back on desire, and one of the questions that we also got was like, we need to actually dive deep on desire, on sustainability in these different episodes. But the first step in any relationship is having a healthy regard for somebody. It doesn't matter whether it's a friendship or whether it's a romance. You have to actually look up to that person to want a relationship with them. Regard is composed of, admiration. It's composed of charm, of, appearance, the way that you dress, the way that you look. All of those different things play into this, how you look upon a person. But what was stated here is important to understand. He has a problem with the way that she spends. Mm-hmm. She has a problem with him confronting her about it, to the point of denial. There is no stopping that loop of basically destroying one another's regard for, they're basically going to just continue this cycle until they each have no regard for each other. And the other side of regard is, of course, contempt. And you can see that when he says things like, she won't even talk to me right now. She thinks that I'm, so-and-so, whatever. That is that loss of regard. And if she's in denial about it, there is no changing it. And the flip side is he probably doesn't even know it yet, but he's lost regard for her. And he probably doesn't want to. It shows up in every way, shape, and form, except for our acknowledgement of it. Our lack of regard shows up in the way that we speak to the person, the way that we communicate, whether or not we want the relationship, but we'll not admit to ourselves that we lost regard.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge distinction though. So like in that example though, like let's say like it's not an addictive problem, but it's just excess spending, or he considers it to be excess spending, and they just don't agree on like what's being spent, or maybe she's getting a lot of massages and he's like, you're overspending and this is an issue.
Massages are nice, dude. I mean,
They're worth it, man.
yeah,
But
you gotta spend. You gotta do self-love, bro.
yeah, but but like in that example, that is where this whole regard piece, and it's like, they hate each other, and then now he's basically saying you have an addiction problem or you have a spending problem.
Mm-hmm.
Within that confines, you're absolutely right. Once it passes that though, and if it's true that she's spending to the point that it's ruining their savings, their ability to live in that home and to do daily things, that is straight up addiction, and that addiction needs to be addressed first.
For sure.
Yeah.
It looks like though, regardless, if you're addressing the issue and there is no ownership, there's only denial, it's not going to get better. And if there's an intervention and there is no ownership and it's just denial, it's not going to get better. So there's no solving it at that point. If we're talking about this problem, this person having, whether it's just a bad spending habit or whether it's an addiction, if that person doesn't take ownership, you cannot expect that the relationship will change, which means that if you want to stay, but don't stay with the expectation that it's going to change.
Yeah, but also be clear about the immediacy of it. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at too, is like addiction is addiction. And once a person is addicted, they're out of their mind. They need treatment right away. So if it's that at that level, then you're going to have to address the regard and all those relationship components. But first thing first, if it's at that level, that person needs help. They need to, get clear and then start working on the marriage.
No, you're right. If it's to that level, there's no point in even talking about the relationship or doing anything until that's
you're a
fixed.
drug addict. You're an addict right now. You need some rehab right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That brings up like this interesting thing of there's really no fixing damage when the damage is still occurring. Like if, let's say it's not an addiction. Let's just say it's a bad spending habit, right? It's still causing that loss in regard. She loses regard for him confronting her. He loses regard because of the way that she's spending. And there's no point in even like trying to fix that thing until the actual behavior is addressed, until the problem itself stops. And so when there's denial and the refusal of ownership in this, it's weird to expect that it might get better. It's almost like, if I were to bring a different analogy into it, it'd be like, let's say that you repair cars. Why would you start the process of repairing the car when someone's just taking a hammer to it nonstop? And you're like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to fix it. I'm going to fix it as they go. No, they can do more damage than you can possibly fix in the amount of time. And you just sit there and keep patching up stuff while they just keep moving around the car and banging holes in it.
No, but I mean, you're right. And that's kind of like when you're addressing like superficial answers. But like, for example, like our 12-week relationship process, when we get to the core values, like one of the clients, like this whole thing is that you're spending too much. They're arguing about you're spending too much. Mm-hmm. You're getting massages. You're doing all of these things.
Like I said, dude, massages are important.
But yeah, I was like, yeah, massages are awesome, right? But it became like this thing, like you're a crazy spender, when in truth, like it wasn't. And then when we broke down the core values, this was the thing. She was like, I do this because I don't have any intimacy, or there's no emotional connection in our relationship. So once that got broken down, and he was like, oh, if I connect more, can you be a little bit more responsible? Yeah. That compromise was made. So, at the core of things, it looks like it's this, but once we get to the core values, we can actually rectify that instead of just constantly damaging the car. For sure. I love that visual. Like it's still in my head right now.
Like, yeah.
Starting the car and just
the
bang
futility of like one person just, I got the sledgehammer. Yeah. You're just going to keep patching. Yeah. And, but you're 1000% right that what's important is there has to be ownership first. And then the second step would be understanding why. Why is the person spending? Why are they doing that thing? Because obviously there's something there that they're trying to, there's some sort of need that we're feeling. That is the addiction, right? We all have different addictions, and what we're really doing with them is covering up some sort of emotional damage, some sort of trauma. And so once that's discovered, you could actually start working toward, fixing. But on the other side, like in many examples, oftentimes a husband thinks his wife is spending an insane amount of money when she's not. And in reality, it's often him who has the car. He's got this crazy, Porsche,
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, why are you spending so much on these
Exactly.
lessons? So it could be a
Yeah.
lot of things in our perception and whatnot, but fundamentally, I think we've covered it.
No, for sure.
Okay. Here's a good one. Sometimes in a relationship, the other person tries to hold you to a standard that they themselves have achieved. And what they forget is the fact that you're not the same person.
Okay.
Okay. So that is, they go on to basically say, if you're basically, does that make you selfish? If you're holding someone to a standard, does that make the person selfish?
Yes.
So if I'm holding you to my standard, does
Well,
that make me selfish?
yes, because okay, if it's a business partnership, like, you know, we're going to work together and then there's a high standard that you have. Absolutely, right? But if I choose you as a partner and you are who you are and I'm with you all this time and then I'm holding you to a standard that you really never showed in the first place, I feel like that's unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Like that means like it's more of an issue thing or it's a control thing.
Yeah, there's kind of two problems at play with this one because number one is the standard that I have, I would communicate to you.
Sure.
So, like in that example, right? Or even just as, let's say, as friends, or you know what, this is a romance. So, Glenn, we're married again. We've been married in many of our case
People talk
studies.
about the role play and our acting abilities. We should change careers. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there's legs in that. We should do that. In 20 years, we'll maybe get like a side role in a something. So we're married. Let's say that, I have a crazy high standard for, I don't know, maybe it's my work ethic, maybe it's whatever it is. The things that I do, I want them to be perfect. And so I hold you to the same standard, right? There's a weirdness in this because number one, if that were the case, I should probably communicate it. Like if I say, if you're going to clean the house, you should do it to my level of cleaning the house. That's kind of a strange thing, number one, to do and say. But maybe there's certain areas that matter enough to me where I say, look, if you're going to do this thing, this is one of those areas that makes it's important enough to me that it needs to be done this way. But otherwise, there should also be areas where I'm giving, right? Where I shouldn't be having that expectation. But either way, was it ever communicated?
Yeah, exactly. Like if it was not communicated, or this is the other thing too, like if you have, okay, let's say I was cleaning in that way at the beginning when we met and I was doing those things and then now it's a drop off. That expectation is reasonable because I was showing that behavior before.
Yeah.
But if I was never really showing it and then now you're expecting it, I just feel like that's unreasonable.
It's unreasonable and I would say that is kind of selfish because if you have a different standard of living and I chose this relationship with you and I knew that going into it, then I shouldn't expect you to adopt that expectation, the way that I want to live. What we might say is like, you know what would be probably best is that we just hire somebody to come in and do the cleaning to the level that you want it done.
Yeah.
And then that's the solution. But it's not me expecting something of you that you never demonstrate to begin with, because the problem is really on my side. If this was important to me, why did I marry Glenn?
Yeah, because I'm a slob.
You are very clean, actually. Just as a side note.
Thanks, man. I appreciate
When
that.
I go to your house, I don't know if that's you or if that's Aki, but you guys are both
Oh, it's definitely her.
very clean.
Yeah, but I think I'm like fairly tidy, but she's much more cleaner than me.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, that's the weirdness of it is like, why would you be choosing the relationship if that expectation is something that is key and important to you? Why would you choose it knowing otherwise?
Like to me, and then once again, this is more of a blanket. Like, I'm not trying to be extreme, but usually in general, expectations are not loving. Like for example, like, I hear this a lot. When working with couples, like, oh, I want my partner to start communicating with me now.
Mm-hmm.
Were they that way ever in the relationship? No, but at this point, they should just do it now.
Yeah.
That's not a reasonable expectation, right? Like if they never did it and that's not their personality and you chose to be with them, why are you expecting that now? That's just causing resentment and frustration, and it's an expectation that's in your head.
But on the flip side, there is another possible issue that does happen quite a bit, which is during a courting or I don't know. Why did I use that word? When you're dating, early in the relationship, right? There is this tendency for people to put this best foot forward. I'm going to be the best version of myself, and to kind of almost become a person that they're not, just to win the other person over. That creates expectations that are reasonable and justified. Because if you're dating somebody and they're this person, and then suddenly you're married and they're someone else, you've got the right to kind of go, hey, what in the hell happened right now?
No, I agree with you. But on the flip side, like going back, like let's say I'm that person, and then I was like, yeah, cool, I'm pretty laid back. I don't have a lot of expectations. I'm just chill. You just be you.
Mm-hmm.
And then now they're flipping the script too.
Yeah,
that was a lie too.
True. It can go both ways on that. But that's the point, though, is that those expectations can sometimes be very much justified based on our earlier behavior in the relationship. Sure. And when those things change and they're taken away, then there's cause for, well, we need to discuss what's going on.
But that's that's the beauty of relationships, though, because if you're a healthy person, right, whether you have friends or you're at work, you're going to be the same person. And then in the intimate setting, you're just going to show more of who you are. That discrepancy is not so big.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you're really sweet and you could be really understanding with friends and workers, and then you get home and you're very controlling and angry, that's because that's work that you need to work on.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of us, though, recognize that or have learned how to recognize that, especially when we go into relationships when we're younger, right? It's weird. I think I remember when I was younger, the idea of dating was to put on a show. It was to, in high school, and not saying that I was married in high school, but I'm saying that in high school, everybody goes to prom and you get dressed up and you do things that you would never do on a regular day. I mean, you go and get a limo and that's the idea of dating, right? That we're all sold. You go and do these extravagant ways of, at least in Utah, we had these crazy ways of asking to go to prom. And none of those things, those romantic gestures are not sustainable on an everyday basis, but that's the expectation that you have of this is what it is to date. So you almost, I feel like in a lot of ways, a lot of us will grow up to be kind of trained to have this idea that dating is something more than just what you would do on a regular basis. It's your best foot forward. It's the best version of yourself, and it's inherently unsustainable. And we don't know any different until we're 30,
No, and that's why I love your definition of dating is doing everyday things with that person.
Yeah.
Like you're not trying to romance them and create this ideal Cinderella story. It's, this is who I am, and this is how I live for the most part, and I want to see what you're like in that scenario. That's a healthy dating environment.
For sure. But I mean, that's not...
Most people don't do that.
That's not the thing. Like if you wanted to date like we learn in high school, which is basically romantic occasions and prom and all this stuff, if you want to date like that, you need to be a millionaire that has no job or responsibilities.
And works out all the time.
Like you need like tens of millions.
Yes.
Because there's just no way. Like that's not life.
No, agreed. Like it's just unreasonable. Like it's planted in your head. The fantasy versus the reality.
Yeah. So all this is to say that those expectations of, somebody else, they can be created from numerous different places. If the expectation, the bottom line is to look at whether the expectation is justified or unjustified. If the expectation is unjustified, meaning I was who I always was, and now this person is just putting that on me, that's unjustified and it's selfish. But if the expectation came from a place that was justified because this was the behavior from before and now this is changing, then it is justified and something, it just needs to be discussed.
No, for sure. And then I think maybe it's changing the term. If instead of expectation, it's understanding.
Sure.
You're understanding who this person is, and within who they are as a person, you understand what they can and cannot do or what their capabilities are.
Yeah. I like that we brought up high school earlier because I think we might be going back to, oh no, this is not high school.
Are we going back to high school?
No. Okay. The next question.
Okay.
He said that this is very high school of me to ask this.
Sweet.
But he did not say he was in high school. Okay. This was specifically addressed to you. Hi, Glenn. I honestly feel dumb for asking you this question because it's all very high school, hence the high school. But I don't know what else to do. I would love for some advice. I'm in a pretty classic love triangle situation where a friend had a crush on me and I was very forward flirting. Wait, and okay, the friend was forward in flirting with him and making moves, all while I have been much more interested in her best friend. And her best friend is also very interested in me. So we want to date each other. But the original best friend who had a crush on me is the most stubborn person I've ever met and will not allow, that's all in caps, will not allow us to date or even just to try things out to see if there's something there. She claims that her life is just too hard right now and she doesn't need the burden of watching her best friend's date or her best friend date the guy that got away. Any suggestions would be very much appreciated. First, this is not a love triangle.
No, because
A love triangle would be, go for it.
I love you, you love me, and there's this triangle taking place.
Yeah, it would have to be he loves her.
Yeah.
She loves her best friend loves him. It would have to be this three-way. He's
the center. He's getting it both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First, good job.
I mean, man, congratulations. Mac Daddy of the Year, man. You should be coming on the show. This is how you get two people like you.
Glenn? How dare you? No, I mean, what we do have here is a case where, I mean, this is again going back to unrequited love, right? This basically, it's these two people like each other, and this other person who likes the guy is out of it. And honestly, my thought here is just be open and honest and tell the person that we're going to date. And, I'm sorry if this is, again, evaluate the relationships. If these two best friends are incredibly close, and maybe it's worth not jeopardizing that at all. But if you're going to pursue this thing, then be open and honest about it.
I mean, I guess once again, we're just taking what's being said, but if that one friend, it's really selfish. Like, it'd be one thing okay, if I was that friend and I'm like, man, this is really hurtful and I'm having a hard time, but I get it. And she's my best friend and this is so weird, but I'm just really hurt right now. I mean, that's a separate conversation, right? Because I'm just expressing my feelings versus you can't do this for me. And how can you do this to me? That's another level. That's not your responsibility.
Yeah. This friend that's being hurt right now.
Yeah.
From what was said.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. Nothing has been.
You're wounded. You're wounded, and this person doesn't like you back in that way, and he likes your best friend. And if that's your best friend and you want them to be happy, you gotta let it happen. If that's what a friend would do.
Yeah, it would be different. If you'd done something wrong in this scenario, and I can give you actually a perfect example of this. I think I mentioned. I don't know if I talked about this story on the podcast yet. Maybe I did briefly, but. In high school, this is very high school.
No, you did tell that story.
Did I tell this story?
You should tell it though, because it's fitting.
Okay, so I had someone that I liked pretended to like me in order to get to my best friend. So she asked me out, and I liked her, and then we were out on a date when she kept asking me, "Oh, let's go and see what so and so is doing. Can we call him and get him to come out?" I'm like, "This is weird. Why would you want my best friend to come on our date?" And when I finally gave in, was like, cool, everybody likes him, let's go ahead and bring him out. They basically started making out on my date with this person. That's effed up, because the intention was you asked me out. This wasn't even you used me to get to him. That's completely screwed up. But in this situation, this is just, okay, you don't like her back and her feelings are hurt. And now she's saying, well, if I'm hurt, you guys can't be together. And that's wrong. There's nothing right or good about that. And it's frankly, like you said, quite selfish. And you've done nothing wrong in this scenario that's been spelled out to us. So be clear and open about it. Personally, if a friend of mine said that to me, I would, regardless of whether I dated this person, if my best friend said, I don't want you to date this person simply because she doesn't like me and I liked her, so you can't date her either, I would say, I don't think you're going to be my friend anymore. Whether or not I date her is one thing, but you're probably not my friend anymore. And the reason is because it's just weird. It's a weird expectation and intention to say, because I'm unhappy, I expect you to be unhappy as well.
Yeah, very selfish, very one-sided. I mean, it's coming from pain, but yeah, he needs to like, look, I respect you. I'm sorry that you're hurting, but I'm going to do this. And then the two friends, they need to talk it out too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything just needs to be clear. Boundaries need to be set. And then your adults do what you need to do.
Exactly. Okay. So be open, honest. Go get your date on.
Yeah. Boundary set. You know, when she's like, this is all on you. No, this is on you, but this is what we're going to do.
Yeah. Or, I mean, this is just spitballing. You could put it out there that like, hey, you know, Mormon fundamentalists have figured out a way to, you know, have the best of all worlds. What do you think about moving down to somewhere in remote in southern Utah and perhaps getting a little polygamy on?
Let's do this.
You know?
I think that's the best advice right there.
There you go.
There you go, man.
We'll end on that note.
Yeah. Mac Daddy of the Year. He should come on the show and tell us how he did that.
Boom. And with that, if you want coaching or advice, come to Dr. Glenn.
There you go, man.
I'm just kidding. But I always tease Yen about that. She's like, if you ever did this, I would kill you. I'm like, honey, first step is just to ask you if you'd like to bring that, you know, your best friend into our marriage. That's step number one. And then she gets that look. I'm like, it works for the fundamentalist. It should work for everybody.
You're convincing me, man.
Right?
I'm on your side, bro.
Hey, I think they got something. I mean,
yeah, I think.
Okay. Teasing, joking aside, people are going to message us and be like, I can't believe you gave that advice. We're completely joking. We hope you all have enjoyed the episode. If you did, and you weren't completely turned off by our jokes, be sure to check us out on 12weekrelationships.com. It's actually the website for the entire platform where you can learn more. You can actually sign up for the coaching waitlist where we do give actual honest and useful advice, not joking advice. But yes, what Glenn and I specialize in is essentially creating a research-driven framework for how to help people create healthy relationships, all relationships. And it's pretty cool. We have 500 plus case studies now that have backed up this process. And now we have a whole list of clients that are raving about it and enjoying it.
Yeah, it's you know, honestly, it's been amazing. And just meeting all the wonderful people and then the breakthroughs that they're going through, it's been really, like, honestly, it's been like one of the most enjoyable experiences of my life.
Yeah, no, this is so far of all the things that I've done, this is the most meaningful, impactful for me personally. And I love everything that I've done, but this is that next step of doing something that can really help a lot of people. And I've enjoyed it too.
Yeah.
So with this, thank you so much for listening. If you guys would like to help us out in the podcast, we have a growing number of reviews on iTunes, and each of your reviews actually helps us tremendously, helps people to find the podcast and to learn about the platform. So we'd love for you to hop on the iTunes, leave a review. You know, if it's a positive 5-star review. If it's not, then just shoot us a DM and be like, you know what? I hated your jokes last episode. Don't ever do that again. And we will take your critique seriously. We also take your questions seriously. So if you have questions, jump onto Instagram. You guys can DM us at 12-Week Relationships. And we don't do advice over DM. We don't do advice or therapy there. It's actually not legal or ethical for us to do so. But what we can do is bring it onto the podcast and have a discussion about what's shared and kind of give some thoughts around the subject, just like we did today. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.